Welcome to No Filter Doctor, where we cut through the health hype and dig into what's real, what works, and what's backed by evidence. I'm Dr. AK. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining. Today we're going to talk about creatine supplementation. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't, but today you're going to know all about it. It's definitely a hot topic with health trends right now, and patients ask me about it all the time. But what is creatine? What is it supposed to do? And does it actually do what it's supposed to do? Is it harmful? So these are all the questions. Let's get the answers. Before we get into what creatine is, we need to discuss some basic human physiology. Don't worry, this is not going to be boring. It's very exciting stuff. So there is something called ATP, and that's the abbreviation for adenosine triphosphate. This is a crucial source of energy in our bodies. It is used for pretty much everything: muscle contraction, nerve transmission, making DNA, proteins. You need it to survive. You can't really live without ATP. What creatine does is it acts as a compound that buffers the regeneration of ATP, especially in our muscles and our brain. Our bodies make about half of the creatine that we need, but then the other half needs to come from dietary sources such as meat and fish. Creatine holds on to phosphate groups and hangs out in our muscles. So whenever our body needs to make adenosine triphosphate, 3 phosphates, our body will go to that phosphocreatine and pull that phosphate off. So creatine makes sure that those phosphates are readily available to make energy. This is a super simplified explanation, but it's enough to kind of understand the importance of creatine and allow us to move on. Creatine supplementation is just taking creatine orally. It's usually in the powder form. It comes most commonly as creatine monophosphate. The good news is if you end up taking more creatine than your body needs, you just pee it out. So you can't overdose or anything like that on it. The most common use of creatine supplementation is typically in athletics. 1,000,000 years ago, when I played rugby for Penn State Women's Rugby Football Club, I took creatine. Back then, we knew that you could increase muscle mass, improve your strength, expedite post-workout recovery, especially with weight training, resistance training. But creatine's actually come a long way in the last 25 years, and there are other benefits. One of the first benefits is cognitive function. So there were 2 systematic review and meta-analyses that were done that looked at older adults who had low baseline creatine levels, and they supplied them with creatine supplementation, and they actually had improved cognitive function. The thing is, though, the exact dose and duration that you need to have that improvement is unknown, and the results were inconsistent. Not everybody had the same effect. So while there's definitely some kind of correlation here, we're not entirely true of causation. Here's a brief explanation of correlation versus causation. So correlation is when 2 things are related. Causation is when something happens because of the other thing. An example I can give is, in the summertime, people eat more ice cream. Also, drownings increase in the summertime. So obviously, there is a correlation between eating ice cream and drowning, and that correlation is summertime. But you can't say if you eat more ice cream, you will drown. That would be causation. So when it comes to creatine and cognitive function, there is a correlation, but we're not exactly sure if there is a causation. Creatine supplementation has also been evaluated in sarcopenia. Now, I've talked about this in prior blogs. Sarcopenia is age-related progressive skeletal muscle loss that eventually leads to some kind of functional decline. This muscle decline is unavoidable. It's going to happen. We all lose muscle as we get older. However, if you participate in strength training, especially resistance training, you can increase lean muscle mass and change the rate of that decline and hopefully avoid functional loss as you get older. So when they looked at creatine supplementation in combo with resistance training, the greatest benefit was seen when patients loaded creatine and then followed a higher dose regimen of at least 5 grams per day for 24 weeks. So it had to happen over an extended period of time in order to see that benefit. A smaller benefit did exist when patients didn't load and only took creatine on resistance training days. So if we want to avoid that inevitable skeletal muscle loss, I shouldn't say avoid, I should say if we want to slow it down, that would be more honest. If we want to slow down that rate of skeletal muscle loss, creatine supplementation might be an option. Another area of study that I found really interesting was that of neuroprotection. So there are certain neurodegenerative disorders such as Parkinson's disease, Huntington's disease, dementia. There are some animal studies that suggest creatine supplementation may offer some neuroprotection in those conditions. We don't really have any large human trials to lean on for that, so we're going to have to wait for some more data to come out. There are also several other areas where creatine supplementation is being evaluated, things like concussion recovery, bone strength, perimenopause and menopause, and even mood disorders. So I think when it comes to research and creatine supplementation, there's a lot of things that we know about it that we didn't know 25 years ago. And it sounds like there's going to be a lot more areas where maybe it is applicable, which is very interesting to me. One big question, though, is it safe? So I talked about the fact that you can't really overdose on it. Whatever extra you take, you're just going to pee out. But you can't talk about peeing things out without talking about the kidneys. Your kidneys have a filtration system in them, and that filtration system kind of decides what electrolytes you need to keep, what you need to get rid of, how much water you need to keep, what you need to get rid of, along with different waste products. And there is this question of whether taking creatine adds additional stress to the kidneys. Well, the good news is that in healthy individuals, there are no reported adverse effects on the kidneys, liver, or even the heart, even when we're talking doses as high as 30 grams a day, every day for 5 years, which just seems outrageous because that's like a loading dose every day. The key word there, though, was healthy individuals. People who have pre-existing kidney disease or those who are at risk for any kind of kidney dysfunction, such as uncontrolled diabetes or really high blood pressure, maybe hereditary forms of kidney disease, those individuals should not take it. And while we talked about there's no effect on the liver of a healthy person, people who have existing liver disease also should not take creatine. The most commonly reported adverse effects are weight gain. Now, obviously, if you're taking creatine and you're trying to battle sarcopenia, you are going to put on muscle mass and you're going to gain weight. That's totally fine. However, you're also going to retain water. Now, I'm going to just cut to the chase and tell you, before I looked into creatine, I was not taking it. And then after I read all about it, I decided to take it. So I'm kind of jumping ahead. I was going to tell you that at the very end. But when it comes to water retention, I do want to kind of just address this. So I have an InBody machine in my office that I use on patients. And this is a machine that uses electrical bioimpedance to measure your fluid levels, your body fat, your skeletal muscle mass. It does not do anything with bone density, but it does look at the composition of your soft tissues. And I started taking creatine probably about a month ago, and I just happened to do another InBody score on myself today, and I did gain weight. Some of it was skeletal muscle mass, but my fluid balance didn't change at all. So I do think it's pretty interesting that you can retain water. I personally haven't experienced it, but I believe it. I'm sure it happens. Other side effects of creatine are GI symptoms such as nausea, diarrhea, and cramping. You can occasionally get muscle cramping as well. This is everything that's been reported out there. So nothing major in terms of side effects in healthy adults. What we don't know is, should kids be taking it? What about adolescents? Should pregnant patients be taking it? Breastfeeding women? There's really no studies that are out there on these patient populations. And so as of right now, creatine supplementation is not advised in these patient populations. I have two boys. I have an 11-year-old and a 12-year-old. They're very much into athletics. They're just now starting to get into a little bit of weight training. I don't let them do anything excessive. And I am not giving them creatine. I gave them a big no on that just because I have no idea what it's going to do. Maybe it does nothing, but I like to know the data. I like to see the studies. And if something doesn't have a bunch of studies to back it up, I'm not jumping on board. It's just not my style. So like I said, I've been taking creatine for a little bit now. I didn't bother to do any kind of loading, and I use it in a post-recovery type of way. You know, I'm 47. I am in full-blown menopause. I have no medical issues. And one of my biggest fears is being that like frail little old lady who falls and breaks a hip. I've seen it a million times in the emergency department. I do not want to be dependent on anyone. So I am fighting tooth and nail to increase my skeletal muscle mass and strength. That's another thing to keep in mind. Your strength will start to decline before your skeletal muscle mass. I actually talk about that in another blog. The title of it is The Fountain of Youth. And I talk about just everything that happens with us getting old and how it sucks and what we can do to stop it. Okay, so back to my biggest fear. I put myself on a personalized exercise and nutrition plan. It's really important to discuss goals and what you want your goals to be when you're 70, 80, maybe even 90, right? I do this with my patients all the time. We talk about goals, we get some metrics, then we put together a personalized plan so that people can meet their goals as they're aging. So I did that with myself, and in 6 weeks, I dropped 6 pounds of fat and I gained 4 pounds of muscle. I happen to be a mesomorph, so I did all of that without creatine. I then started taking creatine, and I've gained another 3 pounds of muscle mass. So again, me personally, I'm actually all in on the creatine supplementation. You need to talk to your doctor about whether you're a candidate or not. So if you haven't seen a doctor in a really long period of time, go see one. Things you're going to want to know is, what are your kidneys looking like? What is your liver looking like? You can figure that out with some blood work. You want to know, do you have any other medical conditions, right? If you haven't been screened for diabetes or you haven't had your blood pressure taken in a while, these are all things that you need to have done with your doctor. And then I would have the conversation about creatine supplementation. If you are an otherwise healthy individual, it may be the right thing for you. It might not be, but it's definitely worth a discussion. Looking into this definitely changed my outlook on it. And now I am actually a fan of creatine personally. While I am a doctor, I'm not your doctor. And listening to this podcast does not establish a doctor-patient relationship. This information is intended for general educational purposes only and should not be taken as personalized medical advice. Always speak with your own doctor or healthcare provider before making any decisions about your health.